Okay, so we'll start with 3 bows to the triple gem. 1, 2, 3. And then I will do one-time salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to that blessed one, the worthy one, the perfectly, completely enlightened one. Okay, so we will be continuing now our reading of Anguttara Nikaya. We're in the Book of Fives. And so I will go through probably these first 2 suttas a little bit quickly because we've covered some of the points before, and then dwell a little bit more on number 55. Okay, so number 53, the theme of this are the 5 factors. Here I put sort of in brackets that assist striving. So we have the word, the Pali word pradhana, means striving, and the factor is anga. And the word pradhana, of course, what is meant by striving is striving in meditation. In other words, undertaking intensive meditation. And so we know when the Buddha, before his enlightenment, he practiced very diligently for 6 years, different types of ascetic practices. So that was his kind of pradhana. He calls that his pradhana during that period, the 6 years of pradhana, of striving, though it was not practicing the right path. But now when we undertake the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, particularly when practicing right mindfulness and right effort together, then that is pradhana. In fact, the word pradhana is sometimes used to represent the 6th factor of the Eightfold Path, right effort. So the actual word used in the formula for the Eightfold Path is vayama, but pradhana is a synonym for vayama. So is striving or effort. And then there are 5 factors. Somebody raised a hand. I'm not taking questions now, but maybe is there some problem or something?
Bhante, I have a book. I want to know what page.
Oh, you look for number 53. Let me see what page this is. In the file, it's page 74. The document doesn't have page numbers, but in the file, it's number 74. But if you have the Book of Fives, you just scroll down until you get to sutta number 53.
It's page 681.
Oh, I see. If you have the hard copy book, then it's okay. I'm using the electronic file. 681, you said?
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have these 5 factors that are beneficial, that help striving. So let's see what the 5 are. So the first, and he's speaking with reference to a monk, but it could really be any practitioner, is that one possesses faith, that namely faith in the enlightenment of the Tathagata or the Buddha. Since this faculty of faith, this is what will enable you to sustain one's practice through the difficulties, because as one goes through the practice, what often happens with people is that when they start meditation, after they get through the initial difficulties, sometimes you go through periods where you start to experience really good results. Bliss, piti arises, that's joy, sukha, a lot of happiness and pleasant feeling, upekkha, equanimity. And so one starts to get, very good results, but then what happens, and this happened in my own development too, somehow that fades away and one loses that, and it feels like one is almost like entering a desert where nothing is happening. You go on practicing and things don't seem to be happening. And now if you don't have that really strong faith and conviction and confidence, then when easy to get discouraged, and then you give up and think, there's nothing to it. Maybe I just induced these blissful experiences just psychologically. And so then you lose your enthusiasm and then you just give up. But if you have faith, in the sense of trust or confidence in the Buddha, then you continue to persist with the practice, knowing that there's going to be periods of good results, of pleasant, uplifting experiences, and also periods where that seem to be barren and sterile and empty, where nothing seems to be happening. And sometimes even a descent into dark periods where, this is a common experience where sort of levels, layers of defilements that are buried deep in the mind through the practice, they start bubbling up to the surface. And then they can create a lot of commotion in the mind. And so if you don't have that faith, then you might either lose trust or confidence in the practice, or just surrender to the defilements and let them take control. But if you have this faith, then you just continue, endure the defilements, use whatever appropriate methods there are to deal with them. And then you continue until one can gradually weaken those defilements. Then often there'll come another period of very peaceful or blissful experiences, then other periods of dry, dull, barren stage, and then periods where defilements come bubbling up. And that is just part of the process. And so it's faith that enables us to continue to persist without giving up, without becoming disillusioned, without sort of reverting from the path just to follow a completely worldly way of life. Okay, so faith is one of these factors. And I've designated some of them are also included among the 5 indriyas, the 5 spiritual faculties, and faith is one of them. Okay, the next is quite important for good practice, and that is to have good health. So it's mentioned that the practitioner is seldom ill or afflicted, so generally maintains good health, not subject to a lot of pain, and then has a good digestion, which is neither too cool nor too hot. I'm not quite sure of the meaning of this, but moderate and suitable for striving. So if you have, I think people have digestive problems. I've known quite a few monks when I was back in Sri Lanka who had persistent digestive problems, though they were good practitioners, but when they had when these digestive problems would act up, it would sort of interfere with their practice. So if you get bad digestion, sometimes people get a lot of stomach aches or burning sensation. Perhaps it's too much bile comes into the stomach or the intestines, and one gets burning sensation after the meals. Or could be problems with the movement of the digested food. And some people tend to have diarrhea, so they have to go to the toilet very often and having loose motions. Other people might have constipation, and so the waste accumulates in the intestines and it causes discomfort. And so all of those problems, overly hot digestion, stomach ache, diarrhea, constipation, will become impediments to the practice. So this is like a purely physical impediment. And then if one is free from that, that is a positive factor supporting one's practice. The third is more sort of personal or psychological. This is being honest and open and revealing oneself as one really is to the teacher. And the teacher with a capital here means the Buddha, it's the sutta, and one's wise fellow monks, or could be fellow practitioners. And this means particularly when one is meeting certain inner obstacles and one has these problems, difficulties one is facing in one's practice. Or it could be transgression of the precepts. And so one wants to discuss them openly in order to get advice from others, to get some, or to clear one's conscience if one has committed some transgressions. And so within the monastic system, the Buddha has instituted a way for monks to clear themselves of when they commit transgression of the precepts. For most of the transgressions, the less serious ones, one is supposed to confess them to another, a fellow monk, or in the case of the nuns, a fellow nun. The more serious transgressions, you have to undergo a particular rather burdensome process of rehabilitation. But in any case, one should be honest and open in discussing one's problems, difficulties with one's teacher or with one's fellow practitioners. So this is, you could say, honesty and openness is a factor of striving. Okay, the next is energy. And again, this is one of the spiritual faculties. And this is the energy, the spirit's mental energy applied to abandoning and overcoming the unwholesome states of mind and arousing and strengthening the wholesome qualities. And then the fifth factor of striving is having wisdom. And this is in the sense of insight. Here is called the wisdom that discerns arising and passing away. So this is referring to a particular stage in the development of insight where one gains it's called the Udayabhaya Jnana, the insight into the arising and vanishing of conditioned phenomena. And so when that insight into arising and passing away is developed, then it will bring, at some point, when all of the faculties are mature, it brings the attainment of the world transcending paths and fruits. Okay, so those are the 5 factors that are conducive to striving. Okay, I won't take questions now, but we'll go on to the next sutta, because it's a similar theme. So in this sutta, the Buddha discusses 5 unfavorable conditions. So these are conditions which are unfavorable to the practice. Let me just see if I can find the Pali term that's used here. Yeah, the Pali expression is asamaya padanaya. So padanaya, of course, is for striving. Then asamaya means literally what are not the occasions, not the right occasions. Okay, so, uh-oh. I see a little problem. A monk is old, overcome by old age. Okay, that's the first unfavorable occasion. So don't get old. Yeah, but actually, what I found is that with age, sort of a lot of the troubles and disturbances that arise in the mind when one is younger sort of settle down, and the mind becomes sort of naturally calmer, more balanced, more peaceful, and becomes somewhat easier to practice. So I guess when one is really burdened by the weakness, the feebleness of old age, then it's an obstacle to practice. But if you maintain one's strength and vitality, even if you're advanced in years, then it shouldn't be an obstacle to striving. Okay, then of course, if one is ill and overcome by illness, naturally that's unfavorable to striving. Though it's said in some of the commentaries, it said that when you're ill, you should sort of take medicine or treatment and relax a bit. But if all the modes of treatment don't prove effective, then you make the determination, even though I'm ill, I'm going to continue striving. You cross your legs and then you practice very diligently. And then there's the account given of those who, through the illness, through contemplating the pain and discomfort of the illness, they're able to develop strong insight. And sometimes they achieve liberation or arhatship by striving in time of illness. And when they reach arhatship, then the illness just vanishes. But that would apply in cases when the illness is largely determined by karma rather than by other factors. Okay, the third condition is when there's a famine, shortages of food, a poor harvest, and then it's difficult, and this is in case of monks, to collect alms food, not easy to subsist by going on alms round from house to house. So you don't get sufficient food, then you're always burdened with hunger. And that is an obstacle to diligent practice. And then the fourth obstacle, it sounds a little obscure, even though I translate it very literally. There is peril, turbulence in the wilderness, a bit of a strange expression. And then the people of the countryside, mounted on their vehicles, flee on all sides. But the way I would interpret this under modern conditions, contemporary conditions, so probably also in ancient India, it would be in the time when there is a war taking place, battles taking place, when the country is entangled in a war. For example, we take right now, the situation in Ukraine. I know that there are Buddhist groups in Ukraine. I just don't know how they're managing. But when your country is being constantly hit by missiles and when there's invading army, then it's very difficult to practice diligently. And I remember back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when I was living in Sri Lanka. At that time, there were two wars going on. One was the so-called ethnic war between the Sri Lankan government and the Tamil separatists or militants, the Tamil Tigers. So that war was taking place mainly in the north and east of the country. But then in the south, there was an uprising spearheaded by an organization called the JVP. I don't remember what it signified. Janata JVP. I don't remember what it meant, but these were sort of revolutionaries, partly influenced by Marxism, but also by ethnic chauvinism. And so they were rising up and attacking government officials, government offices, shops, even in the cities and towns. Just about every week, every 2 weeks, they would declare what they call a hartel, artal. It means that they demand that all shops, even buses and other types of transportation, must stop for the full day. And of course, that was very harmful to the economy. And I remember where I was living in a place called the Forest Hermitage in Udawatakele, near the town of Kandy. And yeah, there was a place, like a cave near the hermitage where I was living. And the attendant at our hermitage saw a group of the JVPers that they had congregated. They were using that cave as their dwelling place. And so he was terrified. And he asked, because he saw them and they saw him, and the JVP, they were killing people. Anybody who would expose them, they would kill. Yeah, so he asked for our permission to go back to his home village because he was frightened. So that could be an example of this. And so in times like that, when there's a lot of conflict and even warfare, battles taking place, or social conflict, then it will be an obstacle to practice. And then the fifth, this is internal to the monastic order. So the fourth one is applying to conditions which are external to the monastic order, but which will have an effect on the life of the monastics. But the fifth is one internal to the monastic order. So this is when there's a schism in the Sangha. So there's some disagreement amongst the monastics, and they split into different groups, 2 groups, and they're attacking each other, insulting each other, reviling each other, reject each other. And so when this happens, well, it has a discouraging effect on lay people. So it says that those without confidence or trust in the Sangha don't gain confidence. And some of those who already have confidence, when they see, if they see the monks fighting with each other, then they start to lose their confidence. They start to think, well, we have conflicts in our family life, in our social life, but at least we could look up at the monks as being models of peace and harmony. But then if they see that the monks are fighting, they think, they're no different than us. And then they lose their confidence. But for the monastics themselves, if you're in a community in which there's a lot of fighting, conflict, quarreling, disputes, then it's difficult to practice peacefully. So those are the conditions unfavorable for striving. And then we have, in contrast, the conditions favorable for striving. So here it says the monk is young, endowed with the blessing of youth in the prime of life. So that's said to be a favorable condition for striving. But what I have seen myself, I've seen, especially when living in Sri Lanka, young Westerners come over to Sri Lanka, they get ordained, and then they practice very, very diligently, like meditating 25, 26 hours a day. But then they're too enthusiastic. Maybe they have the strength of youth so they could practice so diligently. But then they come to those periods, what I call the spiritual deserts, where nothing is happening. And then they lose their enthusiasm and give up and leave the monastic life and leave Sri Lanka to go back to the West. And so being endowed with the blessing of youth is not always a guarantee that one will be successful in striving. Yeah, it seems to me that the more beneficial conditions for striving come after the full flush of youth starts to subside and one comes into a mellow middle age. Particularly in the case of young men, the sensual desire can still be strong and come swelling up, bubbling up, and then pull the monk away from the monastic life. Okay, then we have as a favorable condition, this is the same as one of the factors we came with before. The monk is seldom ill or afflicted, but he has a good digestion. Third is that food is plentiful, there's a good harvest, alms food is abundant. But this could also be an obstacle if you get too much food and then you don't know, you don't observe the practice of being mindful of eating and knowing moderation with respect to food. Then when there's an abundance of delicious food, you start eating this, eating that. You eat too much and then you become dull and drowsy. So when there's sufficient food that is contributes, that becomes a favorable occasion for striving. But one has to practice what is called bojane matanyuta, that is knowing moderation in regard to food. Just eat sufficient to quell one's hunger, to maintain one's strength and vitality, but don't stuff oneself. In that way, you yield to gluttony, and then you become burdened by dullness and drowsiness. Okay, the fourth favorable condition, and this applies to the outer society, that people are living together in harmony, no disputes, blending like milk and water, so we don't have that turbulence, conflict, fighting, battles. And so when you're living in a peaceful, harmonious society, that will contribute to provide a favorable environment for practice. And then the fifth, this is internal to the Sangha. So the monastics are dwelling in harmony, in concord, without disputes. And so in that case, then when everybody is in harmony, then everybody feels happy and at peace, and that is favorable for striving. So those are 5 favorable conditions for striving. Okay, maybe now we could take some questions. Okay, I don't see any hands go up. Okay, in that case, then, okay, I just see one. Ali? You have to unmute the microphone.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Bhante. Thank you for the teachings. Can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I have a general question, not regarding this sutta, but I'm just wondering about when they, in the suttas, they refer to the devas. What do they really mean? What are they? I've been kind of like puzzled. Kind of like looking for the devas and whatnot. So what are the devas that they refer to? And I can understand partly, the human realm, but the deva realm, what are we really?
Yeah, the devas are, we would call it, usually it's translated as gods, but it's not gods in the sense of, an all-powerful creator god, but there's a class of sentient beings called devas who dwell, some of them are dwelling in the heavenly realms, but there are also said to be earth-dwelling devas. Those are sort of deities that dwell in proximity to the earth. They're like spirit beings, you could say.
So they're not worldly living at this moment. They're like heroes that we have in all aspects of society. It's not saying the ones that are like currently living are like could be in the deva realm. It's like somebody in the spirit world. Is that right? Correct?
Wait, say again. I didn't quite catch the question.
Those devas, sir. They're not living on Earth currently. It's referred to as in the spirit realm, right?
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not like someone like a hero of any kind, like a societal hero or someone. Would that be a deva, like acting something?
No, not a hero in society. The devas are a type of sentient being different from human beings. Most often we think of the devas as living in the various heavenly realms, but there are types of devas that live, it said, that live in close proximity to the earth. They call earth-dwelling devas. So it's a kind of superior sentient being. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, I see one, Luke. Did Luke? You have to unmute.
Okay. Thank you, Bhante. My question, can you hear?
Yeah, I could hear.
Okay.
Oh, I see what's happened.
Okay.
The headphone, my headphone, it seems, has gotten disconnected. Let me just reconnect it. Okay, go on.
Okay. My question maybe is very general. I just like to know or understand the origins of the practice. You know, I'm thinking you are speaking about meditations.
Yeah.
Right. Could you maybe help me understand in terms of the practice, the origin of the practice, the meditations?
I don't quite know. I mean, where do these different systems of meditation come down from?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
how it got started.
Yeah, well, basically, there would be methods of meditation that the Buddha would have learned from the Indian contemplative communities of his time. But then there would be also elements within the Buddha system of meditation that are specific and unique to the Buddha's teaching. So particularly the methods for developing, say, the 4 foundations of mindfulness that we find in the Satipatthana Sutta, and the other methods for developing insight. So those would be coming out, we would say that they originate through the Buddha's enlightenment.
Okay, but
Yeah.
how would the Buddha get started in this process? You know.
Yeah, well, he would have learned methods of meditation during the period when after he renounced his life in the palace and became an ascetic. Then he went to learn meditation under some of the prominent teachers of his period, of that period. And from them, he learned various sort of methods and techniques of meditation, where they learned the meditation from that, probably came down from generations going back to, several centuries before the time of the Buddha, where these methods of meditation originated. But the Buddha, he practiced those methods of meditation even to their highest stages of development, but was not fully satisfied with them. And then through his own enlightenment, or in the practice prior to his enlightenment, then he discovered other sort of secrets to meditation that the contemporary teachers didn't know, and then applied those, and through that he achieved his enlightenment.
Okay. Okay. So I guess this is part of the faith in the belief in the practice. So okay.
Well, I say what one had by faith, you have confidence in the enlightenment of the Buddha. And I mean, it's not a matter of just, blindly believing in the enlightenment of the Buddha, but through one's trust or faith in the enlightenment of the Buddha, then you have the trust that these methods of practice, of cultivation that are taught by the Buddha or preserved in the Buddha's texts are the means of practice for reaching enlightenment. Okay,
Thank you,
we'll take Jia Huang.
Thank you, Bhante, for your teaching. Appreciate it. I have a question, or I want to confirm with you, because I heard your some talk through YouTube about faith. To form a strong faith, you have teaching about suffering actually is one of the factors to form a strong faith.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you mentioned here, one of the 5 factors contribute to striving is faith.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I'm connecting the dots here, I don't know, I'm actually thinking at the right direction. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Is that, so it sounds like suffering can be conducive to the striving part, which is like if people are sick, they can reflect on the sickness, just like you give example. And then they can meditate on that part and they could strive. And sometimes the urgency, especially come to death, can create an urgency for people to strive. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's very correct. That's very correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, I've heard of cases where people who have been like traditional,
Still not sure that.
people who have been traditional Buddhists, they're by the family tradition, the family upbringing, they're Buddhists, but they don't really have a serious or deep, compelling interest or commitment to the Dhamma. It's just a matter of going through the regular, ceremonies, rituals, celebrating the Buddhist holidays. But then either they themselves fall seriously ill or one of their loved ones fall seriously ill. And then they come face to face with the reality of illness, or sometimes even it might be the death of a loved one, or for themselves a near-death experience. And then they make that strong personal commitment to the Dhamma because of that encounter with serious illness or even face to face with death.
So here it sounds like the favorable occasions for striving is more for striving of meditation. So it's more harmonious, young and all those good situations for the striving.
Yeah. So let's say if one is undertaking an intensive practice of meditation, and then one falls ill a lot, if you get a fever or stomach ache, severe headache, or let's say today, if you get COVID or any kind of serious illness, then it would be an obstacle to dedicated practice, to diligent practice.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Question from Rocky.
Hi, Bhante. My question is regarding the meditation practice.
Yeah.
When I practice myself, I get to a stage where I'm still, but then I start to anticipate and I start to expect things to happen, and that stops me to go further in my meditation practice.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't go anywhere then. Well, what can I do?
Yeah. In that case, you just have to sort of drop that expectation or wanting something to happen, and just treat it as a sort of distracting thought, and drop it and just go back to your primary object. That's all.
Oh, so it's kind of a delusion.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let us move on now. There's another sutta I wanted to cover this morning, and this is a bit controversial. And it seems maybe if I were to give it my own title, retitle it, I would call it Scandal in the Sangha. And it's a bit of like a shocking event that took place. Okay, so the sutta takes place when the Buddha is living at Savatthi. And it says, the narrative tells us, on that occasion, a mother and a son who had become, the mother had become ordained as a bhikkhuni, a nun, and the son had become ordained as a bhikkhu, a monk. And the commentary doesn't give a further background story, so I don't know any of the details. But something, maybe the father, the woman's husband, had died, perhaps, I'm just speculating. And so there was just a mother and the son, and she became a bhikkhuni, and the son becomes a bhikkhu. And then they enter the rains residence. That's the 3-month period of the rainy season. Usually it will be from July to October, middle of July, sometime in July to sometime in October, the Indian rainy season. And so at that time, the monastics don't travel, but they stay at a regular residence, at a fixed residence. And so here they enter the rains retreat at Savatthi. But they had been apparently very close before ordaining. And so they often wanted to see one another, and probably they would visit one another. But it seems a little bit odd, since the mother would be living in the bhikkhuni section of the monastery, and the monk would be living in the bhikkhu, her son would be living in the bhikkhu section of the monastery. And one would think under normal conditions that if, say, the son went to visit his mother, that he would not go alone, but he would go accompanied by another monk. And if the mother came to visit her son, she wouldn't go alone, but would be accompanied by another bhikkhuni. But apparently, from what we see here, they would visit alone. And so they would often see each other, and by seeing each other, a certain bond, in the sense of an emotional tie, was formed between them. Of course, as mother and son, there would be this natural tie of parental tie, but this was starting to move in a different direction. And so because the bond formed, a sense of intimacy arose. And because there was intimacy, lust found an opening. And here maybe it's more helpful to look at the original Pali words, which have a loaded meaning. Let me get I'll just copy and paste the whole passage. Yeah, so the Pali expressions have sort of special, like I would call them loaded meanings, which don't come through so clearly in the English translation. So the bond would be, the Pali is Sangha, which has literally the sense of being thrown together. And then intimacy is visaso. So this could, visaso, and under normal conditions could be just a simple trust, like I have a certain trust in another person. But here it's referring to a kind of like a strong affection is starting to arise. And then otaro, so that is the opening. It's the opening for lust to come into, to seep into the mind. And it might seem a little bit odd for this to be occurring between a mother and a son, but I guess those things do happen. And in the Indian context, in the days of the Buddha, girls can become married at quite a young age. So even at the age of, say, 13 or 14, a girl might be married off. So let's say she's married, we'll hypothesize at the age of 14, or maybe she's married, let's say the age of 13, then she gets pregnant and gives birth to the son when she's 14 years old. Then at the age of 20, the boy can go forth and become a monk. And so she would be, we'll just speculate, maybe 34, 35 years old. He's 20, 21. So at that age, the woman could still be quite attractive and still, and so in that way, a strong sort of sensual bond can form between son and mother. And then it says in the mind, the grip of lust. And this is important, without having given up the training and declared their weakness, they engaged in sexual intercourse. Okay, say if a monk develops a strong affection for a woman or a nun develops a strong affection for a male, and they don't want to continue as monk or nun, what they would do is formally, they would give up the training and declare their inability to continue in the monastic life. Then they can have sexual relations and there's no particular problem. I mean, or at least it's not an obstacle to their monastic status, because they've given up the monastic status. But in this case, the mother and son have not given up the training. They still remain formally monk and nun, but they engage in sexual intercourse. And this, according to the monastic code, is one of what is called the parajika offenses. The parajika offenses are the transgressions of the monastic code that entail that one loses one's status as a monk or a nun. So the word parajika means entailing defeat, that if one commits any of these, one loses one's status as a monastic. And so for the case of the bhikkhus, the monks, there are 4 parajikas, 4 offenses that entail defeat. The first is committing sexual intercourse, which can be whether it's heterosexual or homosexual, doesn't matter, but if one commits sexual intercourse of either type, one loses one's status as a bhikkhu. The second is stealing an item of sufficient value that one would undergo some kind of legal penalty for that act of theft. The third is committing the killing of another human being, either directly or through a command or encouraging somebody to commit suicide. And then the fourth is making a false claim to deliberately making a false claim to a supernormal attainment, what's called an uttari manusa dhamma, a superhuman, supernormal attainment. Okay, so in this case, the man and the woman have committed the first parajika offense. Okay, then somehow word of this, the knowledge about this gets around, and then the monks come to the Buddha and report what has happened. It's interesting here. Now, here the Buddha is laying the blame on the monk. So he said he's referring to that foolish man. So did that foolish man think a mother does not fall in love with her son or a son with his mother? And by love here, the Pali word is sarajati, which is not like the maternal love that a mother will have for her son, or the love of filial piety that a son should have for his mother. But this verb sarajati is related to the word raga, which means lust. So it's not falling in love in the elevated sense of the word love, but the sense of develop lust for. That a mother does not develop lust for her son, or a son for his mother. Okay, what follows from this, I have to say, I find a bit troubling, and I have to be a little bit apologetic about this, because I know many women, Buddhist women, practitioners, for whom I have the highest respect and highest regard. But the sutta seems to be putting such heavy blame on the woman when there's some kind of transgression in regard to sexual matters. So he says, I do not see even one other form that is as tantalizing, sensuous, intoxicating, captivating, infatuating, and as much an obstacle to the supreme security from bondage as the form of a woman. So beings who are lustful for the form of a woman, ravenous, tied to it, infatuated, and blindly absorbed in it, sorrow for a long time under the control of a woman's form, that's the visible form, the sound of her voice, her odor, the taste, the touch. So these are the 5 sense objects. So in the case of these 5 sense objects, the one which is the biggest obstacle to achieving the supreme security from bondage is the form, sound, odor, taste, or touch of a woman. And then beings who are lustful for the touch of a woman, sorrow for a long time under the control of a woman's touch. Then it continues, and I have to say, it gets no disrespect for the Buddha, but the language gets stronger and a bit more disturbing. Okay, while walking, a woman obsesses the mind of a man. While standing, sitting down, lying down, while laughing, while speaking, while singing, while crying, a woman obsesses the mind of a man. But here, really, the blame, I have to say, lies with the mind of the man, not with the woman. The woman is just engaging in her normal activities, but it's the man who allows his mind to become overcome by this obsession. When swollen, and this is really referring, that Pali word here refers to the corpse. When the woman is dead, her swollen corpse obsesses the mind of the man. And then when dead, this seems a little bit redundant, a woman obsesses the mind of a man. Then it says, again, I have to be a little bit apologetic to the women who are on this in this class. Please don't drop off. I'll give my own defense of the women in a moment. If one could say rightly of anything, entirely a snare of Mara, it is precisely of women that one could say this. And then the verse sort of reinforces this. One might talk with a murderous foe, talk with an evil spirit. One might even approach a deadly viper whose bite means certain death. But one should never talk with a woman just one-to-one. Then they bind one whose mind is muddled with a glance and a smile, with their dress in disarray and with gentle speech. It is not safe to approach such a person as a woman, even though she is swollen and dead. Then it goes on, the 5 objects of sensual pleasure are seen in a woman's body: form, sounds, tastes, and odors, and also delightful touches. Okay, so the last 2 verses just turn to general statements on sensual desire. So those swept up by the flood of sensuality who do not fully understand sensual pleasures are plunged headlong into samsara, the round of rebirths, with time, destination, and existence after existence. But those who have fully understood and transcended sensual pleasures live without fear or without danger from any quarter, having attained the destruction of the taints, the defilements. Though they live in the world, they have reached the far shore, they have gone beyond. Okay, when I read this text, what occurs to my mind, certain questions. Okay, if we take statistics on rape, say in the United States, who is it of the two sexes, which one commits more often rape of the other? Is it women who predominantly rape the males, or is it men who predominantly rape women? Okay, I think the figure, it's obvious. It's men probably commit like 99% of rapes, whereas women maybe just, of course, there are some cases where women do commit rapes, but maybe 1 or 2%. I don't know the exact statistics, I'm just guessing. Okay, within families, sometimes one hears of could be an uncle or an aunt committing some kind of sexual misconduct in regard to a nephew or a niece. Which one is it that one hears of more often? The uncle committing some kind of sexual misconduct with the niece, or the aunt committing some kind of sexual misconduct, or the aunt committing some kind of sexual misconduct with her nephew? Again, I'd say 90% of the cases, not 90%, 95 to 97%, it's the uncle committing the sexual misconduct with the niece rather than the aunt with the nephew. Then we have, in this country, maybe in the world, pornography industry, which generates maybe $20 billion in profits every year. So with the pornography industry, towards which kind of audience is the pornography industry directed? Is it directed towards women or to men? I'd say it's especially directed towards men. And then we have now something in the US, maybe globally, something called the Me Too movement. Is it men who are reporting cases of sexual transgression by their female superiors, employers, or other powerful females? Or is it women reporting cases of sexual misconduct or sexual transgression by powerful males in their lives? Yeah, so I think the answer to those questions is obvious. Yeah, so the question arises, why does the Buddha speak in this way? It seems to be laying so much blame on the woman rather than on the male. So maybe I'll open this up to questions and comments. So see if you have anything to say about this. Okay, I see some hands are going up. So one is BC Deborah, and you can unmute.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. And I appreciate, as a feminist, I appreciate your understanding and sensitivity to how women are viewed. But part of what I was struck in here with is that it's the blindness of the monk not understanding the hook of sensual pleasure, that it's really, and going back to the previous sutta, not being open and honest, obviously, with yeah, but also not having the wisdom to see the hook of any woman or, you know, any sensual desire. And I feel like if the Buddha was addressing the bhikkhunis, it would be, you know, the male form.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
That was the hook. And I appreciate that about this, because it's such an, to our way of thinking, an offensive, you know, picture of sensual desire, which just, I think, emphasizes, not even a mother and son relationship is, it is sacrosanct, but it isn't safe.
Yeah.
Because of the sensual desire, not because of the people. Is that part of what you would see in this?
Yeah, though I don't think those of you who who are mothers have to refuse to see your son alone. For those of you who are sons, should then, if your mother says, please come over, say, Mom, I can't come to see you unless I come with a friend. This would seem to be a very exceptional case. And maybe even the sutta, maybe it's possible that it's a fictional account just to underscore the importance of maintaining mindfulness in one's relations with a member of the opposite sex. And in this count, in relation to what you said also, at the very beginning of the Anguttara Nikaya, the first 5 suttas speak about how the 5 sensual objects in relation to a woman obsess the mind of a man, but then the next 5 suttas speak about how the corresponding objects of a man obsess the mind of a woman. So it's the form of a man that obsesses the mind of a woman, the sound of the man, the odor, the taste, the touch obsesses the mind of the woman. So in that case, it establishes some kind of gender parity rather than seeing the woman as the source of all the problems. Okay, we have some other hands, so let's take some other comments. Brenda Walsh.
Yes, thank you, Bhante. I appreciate what the former speaker said, because I agree with that. I feel like I don't feel offended by what the Buddha has said here, because I really believe he's addressing the mind of the bhikkhu.
Yeah.
But what I do find is the way that this has been interpreted is sometimes, and I hope I don't offend anyone here, but the idea that a woman, you know, there's this concept of using a cloth, or a concept of a woman must keep their eyes downcast when meeting a bhikkhu, or there are all these mandates put on a woman because of this. And my feeling is it's really up to the person who is indulging in lust, who needs to do that. And so that there are these ways that this has been interpreted that can become a little bit offensive in my mind in terms of how one deals with it. And I don't know what you think about that, but and you know, it is in other religions too, you know, that women are expected to dress in a way, or even if you go to court when a woman has been raped and they say, well, they brought it on themselves because their dress is inappropriate. Yeah. So it's, I think the Buddha was quite right to indicate that this is a danger for someone practicing the Dharma, but in the way that lay people or even the monastic order interprets it, I think it becomes, it can leave women to feel that they're somehow at fault or unclean, or it's their problem, or I mean, that's just my thought about it. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there really can be problems if, say, in relation to monks, if a woman maybe dresses too, what's the expression, scantily, you know, so there's a kind of a principle of etiquette that, say, if a woman comes to a temple, it's not that she has to cover everything, but not to wear like mini skirts or short shorts.
True,
But
that's appropriate.
to dress modestly. But
Right.
there's nothing about like covering the face. And that cloth, I think maybe you're referring to the practice amongst the Thais, where the monks will use a cloth when they receive some offering from a woman. Is that what you meant by the cloth?
It is. It's a
Yeah,
little.
that's something maybe unique to the Thai Buddhist practice. We
Right.
don't in Sri Lanka. I never encountered that in Sri Lanka, and I don't think the Burmese have that either.
Mhm. Right.
Okay. Let's just, because the time is running, I want to take in the other comments. Gita?
Thank you for teaching this important sutta, Bhante, and we completely agree with everything that you said. Thank you. Because women are often ostracized and they go through a lot in life that people don't see and understand. They suffer internally, and many women stay silent. Even in rape cases, they don't, because Tanuja, when she was in university, she said, Mom, the amount of date rapes that happen are astounding.
Yeah,
in
I've heard about that.
universities.
Yeah.
It's just so sad.
Yeah.
Why don't people have some compassion towards women like you do, Bhante? It's just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, monks are human beings. They're allowed to fall in love. It's just, it's not that they're planning on it.
Yeah.
And if they do, then they should disrobe and do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
a lot of them do.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do. But reading the sutta about a mom and a son having something like this it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
But thank you, Bhante. Thank you for sharing and teaching to all of us. Thank you.
Okay, we could take Heinz Dieter.
Yeah, hi Bhante. Thank you for your teaching. I just wanted to reiterate the very first sutta in your Numerical Discourses, book 1, first sutta, gives that more balanced exposition of lust going either way, going both ways. But my question is, and this may, you would be well justified to say this is too big a can for this discussion, but do you think there's a relationship between what we heard in the sutta and this reluctance to reinstate the bhikkhuni ordination in some circles, say among Thai Buddhists?
I don't think so, actually. Yeah, that would require more elaborate explanation. And my time is running out because I'll have to go to the meal.
Okay.
I don't think that is really the direct connection.
Okay.
Okay, you could see V.
Yes, good morning, Bhante.
Good morning.
I'm just curious, what happened to the father of the father of the son?
Yeah, there's no the sutta doesn't say anything, and the commentary doesn't say anything.
Does the son actually suffered from the Oedipus complex by Sigmund Freud? You think so?
It seems that this could be. I don't think that the son would have killed the father, but there seems to be an enactment of that part of the Oedipus complex, the son falling in love with the mother and marrying the mother. But in the Oedipus case, at least in the case of Oedipus, he doesn't know that the woman is his mother. But here the son does know that the woman is his mother.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'll just take one more, and that is Amy. You unmute? Okay. You have to unmute. Okay.
Yeah, a quick question on the earlier the phrase the snare of the Mara and trapped in the existence upon existence. And so my question is, if we were to get out of samsara and nibbana, I think there was a lot of difficulty, at least on my part, understanding nibbana, that it literally means no flame, right? No fire.
Yeah.
So was it, I seem to remember that there, if a fire is extinguished, it seemed to me that is more of a nihilism. So was it the ancient Indians' understanding of the fire and the flame, that there is some sort of existence of the fire aside from the manifestation of the flame. It's just the term nibbana kind of causes a lot of confusion for me.
Yeah, I think the idea here is that the flame are the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so nibbana as the extinguishment is the going out, the extinguishing of the flames of greed, hatred, and delusion.
Okay.
Not,
Okay.
not,
And
not,
that is,
not to indicate that nibbana is non-existence.
right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
That helps.
Okay, so I'll have to end now. Of course, I'll have to go up for the meal. So we'll end with the sharing of the merits. So I'll recite the verses, and thank you all for joining this morning. Oh, and then next week is December 17th. So next week I will have the class. It will be the last class in the series of talks that I give to the Russian speaking group. But everybody on this call is welcome to join that. Okay, so we share the merits. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasa ta chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva Chirang rakantu mang parang dukkha pata jani dukkha baya pata jani baya soka pata jani soka antu sabepi panino. May those in suffering be free from suffering. May those in fear be free from fear. May those in sorrow be free from sorrow. May all living beings also be thus. And we go sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu,
Sadhu,
sadhu, sadhu.
sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Bhante. And a bow to Bhante. Thank you, Bhante. Bow to Bhante.
Happy
Birthday, Bhante.
Okay, so thank
Thank
you.
you, Bhante.
Okay.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Okay.
birthday. Take care of your health,
Okay.
Bhante. Be safe. Take care
Okay,
of your
thank
health.
you.
Life and good health.
Grateful for
Bhante.
this day.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, thank
you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
Bhante.
Thank you.
Be well,
Okay.
Bhante. Yeah.
Okay,
Be
thank
well,
you.
Bhante. Have a good meal. We'll see you
Okay,
next
thank you.
Saturday.
Okay.
Be well.
Thank
Bye.
you, Bhante.
Bye.
Enjoy